Hello and welcome to So What You're Saying Is. I'm Peter Whittle. I hope you're bearing up over this increasingly long period that we're going through now. It seems interminable. But I'm delighted that today I've got with me one of our most popular YouTube commentators, Mahyar Tousi. Hello there, Mahyar. Hi.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Well, I just referred to the lockdown there. How are you taking it?
Well, it's been a bit of a roller coaster because I live on my own and I haven't had anyone around me for weeks. And but I've been busy. I've been trying to keep busy with the YouTube work, and I live right next to Hyde Park, so I go for walks. Otherwise, it's been quite lonely.
Yeah, no, same. I live on my own too. But you live. I saw that you what your last video that you did. You were walking through Hyde Park, actually, weren't you?
Yeah,
And I just wondered. That was actually about. Well, you had just a bit of a run-in with Piers Morgan, hadn't you? Can you sort of tell us about that?
yeah. It's happened a couple of times. So yesterday morning, essentially, on Twitter, I retweeted the video of Emily Matis.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, on Newsnight when she showed her personal bias as a BBC presenter and attacked Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings. So I just tweeted the video, and Piers Morgan does his usual tactic. So when he sees a tweet and he saw my video of Emily Matis, he, instead of replying to the tweet, he just quote retweets the actual thing so his followers could see it.
Yeah.
And then leaves it there for his minions to attack everybody. So that happened. And then obviously I replied, and then it got worse. And so I challenged him to come on my show, and he refused. That didn't happen. So I made a video about him, and there could be a possibility of me going on Good Morning Britain. You never know.
Yeah.
But I'm more than happy to debate him if he wants, so I can educate him.
What were you saying about Emily Maitlis? I mean, when I watched it, it's happened before, but when I watched it, it was so blatant. I thought I should explain to people that this is on Newsnight, and Emily Maitlis sort of did a kind of preamble at the beginning, which was just completely, wasn't it? Her personal view almost. I thought.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because Newsnight is a flagship news program for the BBC. It's not like a different, like a talk show like This Week with Andrew Neil. Andrew Neil on This Week, that was a talk show, and sometimes he expressed opinions that was allowed to an extent, and even then he was trying to be objective with his views. But Newsnight are supposed to be just reporting and analysing the news and let the guests debate.
Yeah.
So she decided to go personal and actually decide that it's trial by media. She decided that Dominic Cummings broke the rules, even though he didn't.
Yes.
And that was the problem with that.
Yeah. You do a video pretty much every day, or more than one, don't you?
So I do 2 videos a day. I have a 5:45 p.m. news show where I just kind of sit down here in my studio and talk about stuff. And then at 8 p.m. every night, I also upload a daily vlog where I just go through kind of my life, and it's a more of an informal format.
Yeah.
And I also talk about politics in that segment.
Yeah. When did you start your channel?
Yeah, I think it was the beginning of 2018, but it was more of a hobby, and I was just uploading, a video every couple of weeks. Then it cut into like once a week, and but it was primarily in 2019, and with the rise of kind of concerns that with Brexit was it going to happen or not, and then when Theresa May failed to deliver Brexit, that was when I went kind of full time.
Yeah.
And that was when my channel kicked off completely.
Yeah. From the feedback you get, I mean, who are your viewers generally, or are they right across the board?
Yeah, generally they are. There's a lot of conservatives.
Yeah.
There is a lot of obviously Brexiteers, but Brexiteers could be, liberal, could be nationalist, could be conservative, could be whatever. I actually have some traditional, old school centre-left people as well who they're not really voting Labour anymore, but they used to. They might have voted for Attlee at once. But it's a bit of a mix, obviously, and there's a lot of Tories. But what I've discovered is that primarily they are just ordinary people who weren't even political in that sense until recently, until the last couple of years, few years, with Brexit and everything. And when they realized establishment are becoming difficult, so they got involved and now they're expressing their views.
Yeah, yeah. How do you feel the media is going to, the mainstream media, should I say, how do you think they're going to come out of, I mean, I think I know how they came out of Brexit, at least I know how I feel, but with this COVID thing, how do you think it's been? How do you think they will emerge from it?
The problem is, I think they'll just about survive, but in a sense that they've already been down over the last couple of years. The trust and credibility is completely gone.
Yeah.
And you look at the viewership and the ratings for Sky News, for ITV's Good Morning Britain, all these shows. I've been recently comparing them to my stats. Obviously, it's not really comparable, but I generally get more views than Sky News at this point. But that, doesn't necessarily, as I say, it's not comparable because YouTube is grown vast, but it proves a point that for a channel that is supposed to be, nationwide, everybody has, generally speaking, Sky News on their TV, but they're not really watching anymore. Yeah. And so they're not going to be more damaged because they are already damaged. So after this pandemic and everything, the rise of podcasts, independent blogs, YouTube channels is here to stay. And the media revolution has already begun. It's just going slowly. I'll give it, 5 years max. And then, again, bloggers and podcast makers, they will be the main people to go to.
President Trump is going to be signing an executive order, apparently, to basically deal head on with this idea of censorship in social media, Google, YouTube, Twitter, these platforms. Have you ever experienced it yourself, Maya? Have you ever been shadow banned, or are you aware of anything happening to your channel?
Yeah, so I sometimes have issues with YouTube when it comes to monetization and the adverts.
Yeah,
they have a very, very sensitive AI kind of automatic system where it just decides if your video is controversial or not, and certain words are very sensitive. But sometimes the system takes it out of context. For example, you can't use the word war, even if you say I hate war, or feminism, even if you say I love feminism. So I've had issues like that, and every time I have to appeal to YouTube, and they have to manually review it. But generally speaking, they don't really come after, like YouTube specifically, they don't really come after every single right winger they could find. They do go after, but if you get really big and really controversial in their views, then obviously they'll do it. But Twitter definitely is kind of vicious in that sense.
Yes.
And they are, which is stupid because these platforms are supposed to be, their job as a company is supposed to just provide the platform, and then people should just be there, express anything they want, as long as obviously they're not threatening anyone physically with violence. Then everybody should just decide what's being said, including President Trump tweeting something. I wouldn't even say it's the job of Twitter as a company to do a fact checking, because there are Twitter's users, there are journalists on there. They can do the fact checking themselves, and they could then tweet it out. So Twitter interfering in this sort of stuff is just idiotic.
There's a confusion whether they're a platform or a publisher. This is the problem, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and it does confuse. The same thing's happening with YouTube, because obviously they sell themselves as with just a platform. It's the whole Uber arguments, where Uber initially said that we're just an app and the drivers are independent, and then on the other hand they acted like a company and they're like employees, but they weren't giving them money. It was a bit weird. So this is a problem with tech, and with new technology, it takes some time for it to become a norm.
Yes.
But right now we're still going through the phase of these are new things that we have to get used to: Twitter, Uber, YouTube.
Yes. When it comes to the legacy media, the broadcast legacy media, and what you've already mentioned earlier, what you thought might happen, but where do you think, if you were to go forward 5 or 10 years, what do you think the position will be? Will we still be on YouTube? Will you still be doing what you're doing on YouTube? Or will there be some other way in which another channel, or people keep talking about a Fox or something like that for Britain. But do you think that's possible? So far as I can see, Ofcom is a problem here, isn't it?
That's what I was just going to say. The fundamental problem is not necessarily the monopoly of the outlets, the channels out there, like Channel 4 or ITV or any of this. It's the concept of Ofcom that creates a problem, because we live in a society where we have a big government. You have to kind of get used to it. It's very full of intervention, and so you can't really have a complete free society where newspapers and TV channels are completely free to do whatever they want. There's usually some sort of kind of oversight. But why can't they do it the way they do with the press and newspapers? Because the press and the newspapers are free to say whatever they want as long as they're not really attacking anyone. The moment they attack someone or something's libelous, then something happens. Whereas the broadcast, for some reason, Ofcom is sensitive and it's all about impartiality, and that actually creates a problem because BBC, for example, has to be forced to be impartial. The system, the structure is there to be impartial, but the individuals are human, and humans by nature are tribal. Let's just say some of them do it on purpose. Some of them accidentally, every now and then, make a mistake and show their bias. That's just normal. So what I propose is to just do what we do with newspapers, do the same thing with broadcast TV. Have a left-wing TV, have a right-wing TV, and people can decide for themselves.
Yeah, I think at the moment we're operating on a different model, but the BBC seems to think at the moment that, Emily Maitlis notwithstanding, that it's kind of had a pretty good crisis, if you want to put it that way. It's sort of seeing itself as being a binding force, isn't it?
Well, they had a massive influence. The lockdown that we're going through is partly because of them. The pressure that they created, and the government, from what we've heard, Boris Johnson wasn't really keen to fully get into the kind of lockdown situation. He had a different plan, because that was the advice he got from his team. But then they realized there was a PR game as well. They were forced into doing things like this. So this is the influence that the media have had. So in that regard, technically, they're winning. Because they are still the biggest influence. The general public are now so scared because of what the media have told them. They even if Boris says the lockdown's over, they're not leaving their houses. So that's a ridiculous thing. And I said this to Piers Morgan, and I said, you claim that Dominic Cummings' action, driving in a car without infecting anybody, cost lives. In reality, it's your behavior as a broadcast journalist that has cost lives, because there are a lot of people who are so scared of leaving their homes, cancer patients, people who needed treatment to go to hospital because they thought they're not allowed to, and now they're facing issues. So this is the problem with the media, that they do still have the influence, unfortunately.
Do you think you mentioned at the top there that you live alone, so you've pretty much kept yourself during this period, and I mean, as have we all in different ways, but we do what we're meant to do and all the rest of it. But do you think that there should even have been a lockdown?
I actually don't really have an expert view on this, because my view on this is that, and what I'm looking forward to is over the next 6 months to a year, when they do international investigation into different countries and different cases to see which country did better. But also, each country has different cultures and requirements. For example, in Sweden, they didn't need to introduce a full lockdown because they generally obey Scandinavians. So they were already social distancing. They didn't do a full shutdown. You could say that there was a time when the British culture was similar. They would just they'll just be nice and polite and just listen to the advice. But I don't think that's the case anymore. With the country's slightly changed over the last 2 decades. So there's a lot of people from different cultures, different mentalities. Because you've seen the cases have been risen in certain working class backgrounds with a lot of ethnic minorities, because they had to be forced by the government to stay at home. Otherwise, they weren't listening. So in terms of what I've heard from a number of scientists, they say that the lockdown generally isn't the main way to tackle the issue. there are other various ways to actually do this, including obviously testing, including shielding the vulnerable places, hospitals and care homes. And the people who say that cases have gone down because of the lockdown, in reality, towards the end of March, the battleground completely changed anyway. The battleground and the hotspots were care homes and hospitals. Yeah, so the people that, on the streets, especially like young and healthy people who go to their offices and everything, they've been under lockdown. And according to the data that we already have, that the transmission towards the end of March wasn't even happening there anymore. Apart from, if someone had it as a carrier and then went to visit their grandparents at a care home, that was a problem. So we should have just shielded those places and, just get on with your life. But that's where we are.
You went along, didn't you, to the rally in Hyde Park, which was a sort of, wasn't it a kind of civil liberties rally? Is that the way you would put it? What was your impression of it?
Well, firstly, it was actually civilized. A lot of people thought it's going to be something like a group of thugs going around. But it was a mixture of different groups. You had libertarians, you had actual anarchists, you had pro-free speech, pro-civil liberty campaigners, you had just some ordinary people who were fed up, and a few conservatives, and kind of a big crowd. There's kind of a few hundred people there under a lockdown, and the police at that point, they were told they're not allowed to arrest people based on social distancing. They had lost their power, but they still arrested a couple of people.
Yes.
For no good reason. I'm sure obviously their excuse probably like, we're going to give you ASBO or something, but they didn't do anything. They were just shouting. They were like, just expressing their views. So it was a bit of a situation. I don't know if the police will answer any questions in that situation, but I don't know.
There was one guy who looked like he'd been wrestled to the ground. I mean, it was on social media, very heavy-handed.
Yeah, and then because I was there with James Dellenpole from Breitbart, and we were just obviously there to report as reporters. And to be fair, there were probably more reporters than protesters. Again, that was the irony of all these mainstream media journalists criticizing, and they were right next to each other, and it's hypocrisy. Yeah. But James and I were there, and James Dellenpole was actually stopped by the police, and they were asking him to show his identity and his press pass, and I was like, he's part of the press. He's a key worker essentially, but even when they found out that he was, they still tried to cause trouble. I don't know if any of the Sky News or BBC reporters outside Dominic Cummings' house got any warning from the police. Unlikely.
Not at all. It's been a swarm, an absolute swarm. No social distancing whatsoever. It's just wonderful irony what's going on there. Why did you start this up? What actually got you interested politically in this way? I mean, because you do a very particular thing. You do reports to camera, and you're quite outspoken. You're quite strong about your views or what you think. That tends to imply that you're quite passionate about it. So therefore, where did it come from? I mean, why did you start?
Yeah, so very short summary. My background is Persian. I was actually born in Iran. My mother was a political refugee, a proper one, not one of the fake ones. And I actually came here afterwards when she was approved and everything. And so obviously I've been raised here. So I always compared the two systems as I grew up. So I was already interested in current affairs anyway, embracing the new home that we've had with my mother, the freedoms that we have been given. So I was obviously grateful for that. And then I got involved in politics with the Tory party and, with Brexit and everything. And that was generally kind of my passion. But then I kind of stopped because I had a normal job. One day, basically, my father is actually still in Iran. And also some friends and family, they got into trouble. And then they actually said that I've been banned from entering Iran. I'm not allowed to go back. And I was like, I wasn't even planning to go there. Why would I even think about going to Iran? So I got angry for some reason. I was younger, well, 2 years ago. And so I made a random video on Facebook to the camera talking about that. That went slightly viral. My friend said, do more of these. So I just started doing some random videos about freedom, capitalism, free speech. And they just started from there. But then Brexit happened, as in like the actual negotiations. And when Theresa May failed to deliver Brexit, that was when I went full time with YouTube. I was concerned about the situation, and I knew that a lot of people have abandoned the mainstream media. They wanted a new place to go to for their news and everything, and analysis. So I started that, and it went quite well.
But I was reading, before we spoke today, I was reading about, there was an interview you did some years ago in The Guardian. This would have been about 5 years ago, in fact. You had a pretty tough time from people, didn't you? For being, well, I think you call yourself a classic liberal conservative, right?
Yes, I'm a classical liberal, kind of libertarian-leaning conservative, but more conservative than libertarian. And
right, okay.
But that's not Tory. That's just conservative. So yeah, I've received abuse and things like that. But one time outside Tory conference, I was walking with two friends, two other Tories, and then there were protesters shouting at us. And one of them shouted at me, saying that you can't be a Tory. You're not white. You're brown. You're Uncle Tom or whatever. And these sort of things don't work on me. I can't get bullied, especially verbally. It doesn't really work. I just like laugh it up. So I just turned around, smiled.
Yeah.
But then Nick Robinson was there from the BBC, the journalist. They started tweeting the incident. And then half an hour later, I had Sky News in my face, trying to turn me into a victim. How do you feel about that, incident? So I just, was like, it's just some idiot who was protesting for badges. I don't really care. And so I've been attacked a number of times for just being a brown Tory. And especially or a Brexiteer. Apparently, I betrayed my generation. So,
okay. Well, we've all done it. We've all done it. Are you? Have you ever thought of standing? I mean, does sort of electoral politics interest you at all?
No. No. It was a Boris Johnson. I'd rather die in a ditch. But
all right. Really? Why?
Probably a bad thing to say, because if this is obviously it's going to be saved and recorded, and years from now, if I stand, they were like, one day you said. But no, because when I first got involved, that was kind of that. I thought that's the only route. As an activist, as a party member, I thought, well, I'm in politics, so I have to become an MP. I have a number of issues with the political parties, especially the main political parties, the way they operate, because they're very centralized. You won't really have your own say. There's no self-determination. You would just be part of a number. And I'm too outspoken to do that. I don't do teamwork. So that's one issue. And also, it's just, it's not effective. But never say never. I mean, I've always been passionate about London. So you never know in the future if the opportunity comes. There's a lot of subscribers on YouTube that I have who keep calling for me to stand for Mayor of London next year.
Okay.
Because my name is Mahyar, it will be Mayor Mahyar.
Well, no, that would be great, because I mean, the guy we got at the moment, I'm on the London Assembly, the guy we got at the moment is not great, but in fact, I think someone entirely new would be fantastic if you wanted to stand. But London, I mean, obviously you're a Londoner like I am. I went into central London. You live in central London. I went into central London last week, just for the first time for ages, just to walk around. And walking around the centre of London, you think, what is the future actually going to be for a service economy city like London, with basically facing what could be, well, actually almost a depression? I mean, am I being too pessimistic, do you think, or?
No, not really. Because usually I'm the eternal optimist, and that's why a lot of people follow my channel, because I always kind of spread the positivity. But we always have to be also realistic. And with someone like Sadiq Khan as the mayor of London, and with what we're going through, especially over the next couple of years and few years, he's the danger, because I don't trust him to be in charge of London and the economy in London. And he's going to probably come up with some more interventionist policies that would actually backfire in order to help businesses. He's just going to make it worse. And my problem is the opposition is Sean Bailey, the Tory candidate, and he's a nice guy, and I know him quite well. I just don't think he's strong enough to beat Sadiq Khan. And London is tribal. It's always been tribal, but doesn't mean that a non-left winger would never win. And I'm not just going to use Boris as an example, but because the turnout, as you know, the turnout in London elections are quite low. So if the anti-Sadiq Khan voters, if you get them out, you could beat him. So as a Tory candidate or an independent candidate, even an independent candidate could actually win in London. It's just you just need a proper campaign, and basically like a Donald Trump style 2016 campaign. Just go out crazy.
Yes, exactly. I think that if you were to create some kind of platform, I mean, even if it were a new sort of campaign party or something, then I think actually, there's something really there, because I think that perhaps the Conservative label, Conservative Party label, won't be too useful to you. But I think that generally you say you're worried about Sadiq Khan, but I think that the way things have gone, particularly with the virus, it worries me usually that basically London economically will just simply fall apart. I mean, regardless almost of the mayor.
Yeah, no, that's true. Because London has changed massively, not just economically. Economically, there's been a lot of good changes over the last few decades with technology and finance. But firstly, it relies way too much on the finance sector. That's not good. Secondly, the change in the culture and the look of the city in terms of the behavior of citizens. And I'm not just talking about people who come from abroad, but people who are just not from London. Obviously, a lot of people just move around. It's attracted a lot of people, and this is mainly the millennial generation. All these young people who've obviously moved to London, and they all live in either Camden or Hackney or Clapham. And these are the same people who are very happy to be furloughed right now, and they don't want to go back. So whilst they are young and energetic and they want to do something, I've met a lot of them. That not everybody is hardworking. More innovators. We need more people to create wealth in London. More sheep in London right now.
Politically, if you were standing, say, for this or anywhere else in the future, I know you're not going to, as you say, but just in case you do, how would you define yourself? You say classic liberal. Are you a social conservative too, or this is a tension at the moment in the Tory party. To all intents and purposes, seems to have abandoned that side of things. I mean, would you say you were that, or?
Yeah, no, I'm not a Tory in that sense. I'm not wet. No. What I do, I usually divide into three categories: economically, socially, and culturally. The reason I do socially and culturally separately is because there's a lot of areas and topics where people just put them all into social. And they say, are you social, liberal, conservative? But some of them are cultural. So economically, I'm very right-wing, Thatcherite, free market, capitalism, and socially, culturally, I'm conservative. So I believe in the flag, I believe in the Queen, I believe in the country, I believe in borders, strong security, law and order. So in that sense, I'm conservative, and the family values. But socially, and by socially, I'm liberal or libertarian. By that, I'm just talking about individual liberty. You should be allowed to do whatever you want to do as long as you don't harm anybody else. And that, for me, that even technically includes, I know conservatives don't like it, but that even includes cannabis. As long as you're not harming anyone, if you regulate it properly. And obviously, if the case changes, for example, if tomorrow you legalize cannabis and regulate it, and that actually causes trouble and people harming people, and obviously I'll change my mind and I'll actually make a U-turn and say ban it. But my view is, as long as they don't harm anybody else, you should be able to do whatever you want. But in terms of culturally, you have to protect the country, because your country is your home. You don't really keep your door open. You have a door, you have walls to protect your home, and you have to protect the country.
You sound, like in the David Goodhart analysis, the anywheres and the somewheres, you sound very much like a somewhere. You have a very strong sense of place. Whereas London basically now seems to be entirely an anywhere city. So I suppose as patriots, we're quite unusual in London.
Yeah, it's London and New York, these sort of places are fascinating. I understand why a lot of people in the countryside, or like outside of London, don't like London.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Because as a Londoner, as a city boy, I've always been a city boy. I'm kind of, I defend London as a city because it's beautiful. Obviously, it's a collection of villages. It's great concept, but I also understand why people don't like it, and I'm more comfortable being outside London. I feel more comfortable going to a random village in Cornwall or somewhere in Yorkshire, and it's happened many times because a lot of people in London, especially young people, told me, you should be liberal, you should be metropolitan. You're more comfortable here because you're brown. It's diverse, and if you go outside, people are racist, obviously, because they're all white. And in reality, I've been to like a random village near Truro and in Cornwall and other places, and yes, there are basically places where the locals hardly ever seen someone who's not white, but the reaction that they had towards me, she was just like, "Oh, hello, nice to meet you." Didn't even care about my skin color or anything like that. People always mistake like this. The same thing with Brexit voters. They say, "Oh, there's Little Englanders. They're all basically racist." No, you haven't seen them. You haven't met them. Have a chat with them, and then you'll see that they're just normal humans.
Well, we are indeed. I mean, this thing that's happening at the moment, this COVID thing. Do you think, you mentioned Brexit there? Do you think that this is a kind of rehash in some ways of the Brexit thing? If you look at the people who are very pro lockdown, they tend to remain a type. Not all, but I'm being very general. But you know what I mean, don't you? There seems to be this cultural divide now, pretty much entrenched.
Yes, because whilst there are different types of Brexiteers, you got liberal free trade Brexiteers, you have kind of protectionist or nationalist Brexiteers who don't want trade, some, and it's a bit of a mix. But putting that aside, the concept of pro-EU, anti-EU was primarily between subconsciously, without realizing, on a psychological level, the pro-Brexit side, the anti-EU side, were more pro-freedom and more individualism. And the other side were statists. That's all it is. And it's now transformed into the new lockdown, pro-lockdown and anti-lockdown. The people who are pro-lockdown are the statists. It's the same thing. So what Brexit's done, the 2016 referendum, it's opened the door to this chaos of, which is actually good, actually. And everyone's in the media complain about how everything's so tribal or divisive. It's a good thing, actually, because we can now see people in a more clear way and their views, where they stand. And so it goes back to either the Anglo-Saxon mentality of believing in freedom, believing in obviously law and order, but at the same time questioning authority, which is our side, versus the statists. They used to be socialists, then they turn into liberals. And now they've turned into Remainers, and they've turned into pro-lockdown people. It's the same people, just the labels keep changing. They're a bunch of control freaks.
Well, look, Mahyar, if you do decide to throw your hat in the ring or whatever, next year maybe, you must come back and tell us all about your campaign.
Absolutely. If I decide to do that, I'm going to go in with a bang. Usually you go out with a bang, but I'm going with a bang.
Well, look, thank you very much for joining us. It's lovely to talk to you.
Thank you, sir.
And we will talk again, I hope, in whatever circumstances. So thanks very much indeed. That's all for what you're saying is. So see you next time. Thank you very much. Thank you.